Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'll be teaching you about CSS position property, one of the most important concepts for layout and design in web development. By the end of this video, you will be able to understand how to control the placement of elements on your web page using CSS. So let's get started. So I've opened my VS Code down. So what is CSS position? The CSS position is used to define how an element is positioned in a document. Basically, we have five position value, which are the static, the relative, the absolute, and the fixed position. Another one is the sticky CSS position. So let's get started. Let's get our hand dirty. So I'll be using the internal CSS styling, where I'll be writing my styling inside my head section, inside the style tag. Mind you, my VS Code comes with autocomplete. So once I just type style and press the enter, it's automatically create the opening and the closing tag where I will write all my codes. So I don't need this explanation anymore. So I want to just delete them. So the first one is called the static CSS position. Static CSS position. The static CSS position is the default position of any element. For example, when we create our H1, let me just create H1 here and provide a style for it. So this is the div. Inside this div, let me create H1. CSS position. Good. We've already created this. So see where I wrote my code is wrong. It's meant to be inside the head section. Now the CSS position. Good. Let the P be capital letter. Good. CSS position. Now for the static, we said the static is the default position. The default position. Before you apply your style, there are some style that have already been applied by the HTML. So talking about them is like saying that they already have a default value that have been applied. So that's for the static position. The natural flow of elements from the left, the natural flow of element that you see. That's the default positioning. Let me create a div. We've created a div. For this H1 that we created, let me add a property for it. Let's give it a background property of background color. Good. Let's make it blue. Good. It's blue. Let's also add another property called width. Let's make it 25% of the screen size. Then let's also give it height. Height of, let me say 200 pixel. Good. We've given it this height. So this is the default position of this element. This is the default position of this element. You can see how it is. Let me just put little padding. Need of putting padding. We are not all about it anyway. Let me just target it as, in fact, as this. Good. So I've removed it. I've just used div instead. So a div is an invisible container. So this is the default position of the element. This is the default position of the element. Even us, without writing the position element and writing static to it, it has already applied this style. let's let's confirm. Let's see if there's going to be any change here. Let's go position. Let's put the static position. Good. Did we observe any change? No. That's why they say that it is the default position of an element. So the next one we'll be looking at is the relative position. Relative position. Let me write relative position. Good. Relative positioning. So what is the definition of relative positioning? So relative means the element is positioned relative to its normal position. The normal position of the element is the default position, which is the static position. Now, relative to it, what does that imply? That means that now, when we've already provided the property called position and we've already provided a value, now, since it's relative to this, that means that it can actually move, right? So, there's a property that has to do with top. It has property of top. It has property of top. It also has property of right. It has property of left, and it has the property of bottom also. So we can move this element relative to its static position. For example, let's move it. Let's use the top. Let's move it by 50 pixel. You can see the movement. It moves downwards. So let's also move it leftwards. Left. Let's apply the left property. Let's move it by 100 pixel this time around. Let's see. You can see it's also its position also changes. So as a web developer, it is very important to know how you position your elements. We have different elements. Position your different content that you've created, that you want to use to build your website. You know how you position them in your web page. The knowledge of this is very, very important. Now we'll be talking about the next one, which is the absolute positioning. Let's change the property. Let me comment this out. I've commented this out. Let me change the property to absolute. Absolute. Good. So what is absolute positioning. So absolute remove the element from the natural flow. In fact, it removed the element from the natural flow. Let me see. Let me try and open it using the live server. Let me see how it's going to be displayed. It removed the element from the natural flow completely. Okay, still showing like this. Let me let's go back to our code. I just wanted to see how it's going to show there. It removed it completely from the natural flow. Now, now this element now is relative to the nearest position ancestor. There's a relationship between ancestor and descendant. Now that's one thing with programming, even with different. That's one thing with HTML and CSS. So we have children, we have parents. So we have what they call syntax. The syntax is the way by at which you write your code. You arrange your code. So now let's look at this. This is the HTML, right? This is the HTML element, and the HTML element has to make children, the head section and the body section. So under the body section, the under the head section also have other children, which are the meta, the title, and including the style. The same thing still apply for the body. The body has a child called div. Now, this style, this style is the descendant of this head because it is like the children of this. So now, why this is the ancestor. I don't know if you are getting the relationship. So like the parent now is called the ancestor, while you are the descendant of your parents. So now what absolute position simply means is that it is relative to the is relative to the it is relative to the position of its ancestor if it exists, or to the top left corner of the web page. Left top corner of the web page, and that is what just applies now. Because now let me just all this thing is much of English, let's practicalize it. So before we can apply absolute positioning, we need something first. That means that the parent must has the position, must have the relative position. That's what it simply means. So now let's go here. Let me create another div here. Let me call this one, let me give the name of first box, right? I've given it this. Why this one? Let me put it inside here. Everything is fine, right? So it's inside here. So this one is, call it first box, right? Good. Let me provide, let me also change make the background color. maybe the background color to be brown. Let me add the width to be 100%. Let me make the width to be 100%. That means the full screen. And let me give it height property. The height property should be, let me say, 50%. Brown. This good. Then let me add the position. It's meant to be changing, but no, I'll figure why it's not changing. Let me add the position to be relative. It's meant to change, but it didn't change. Let's check. So this is class. Mm-hmm. This is the opening tag. Why this is inside this? Yes, there's an element by this name. The background color is to be brown. We've set the width to be 100%. Width, yes. Height to be 50. This to be 50. Let's open it in live server. Yeah, so I just corrected it. It does not work when you use percentage. So you have to use pixel, or we gave it a class name of box, the background color of blue, width of 100 pixel, height of 100 pixel, and we created the position as absolute. Now let's let me show you another property uh, on how to make your box circle, how to create circle using CSS. So we use the border, call it border radius. Yes, border radius, and we give it 50%. Good. That's how we generate circle. 50%. So you can see the box now. So now we've already created it absolute. We have already created the position and called it absolute. So let's add value to it. Let me make it top. Let's say top 50 pixel. Let's see what we'll call 50 pixel. Good. It moves it from the top 50 pixel. Then let's also create add another property, left. Let's also add left 50 pixel. You see, it moved it by 50%, but this is not the center. If you want to put it at the center, what are we going to do? Let's look at our first, our our parent div, or the descendant div. It has a width of 250. So for this one to be at the center, we are meant to, if you push it a little bit, let's try 75. Let me see, 75 pixel. No, 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 not top, not top. We just did 75. Let's try 75 pixel. Everything is all about calculation. You would calculate it and know. I think yeah, 75 works for it. 75 plus 75, 150, then plus 100, which is 250. So it's perfectly at the center. So the distance between here is 75. The distance between here is also 75. Why this occupies 100? Remember, it's actually a box, but we use our CSS to turn it into a circle using the property called border radius, and we set it to 100%. So that's how we use the absolute position. So the next one will be talking about is the fixed position. Like as the name implies, fixed. When we say something is actually fixed, that means that it is it is in a fixed state. That means that when you scroll up, it will still remain in the same state. Look at this. We are As we are scrolling down, is moving. But if I change it to a fixed property, let's see what it will act as. Let's see. You can see we've already changed it to fixed, so it will remain in that position, fixed. You can see it's not moving at all. So that's what fixed means. And most times we use fixed for the navigation bar. Like if you see your website, when you're building your website, you see when you scroll down that the navigation bar that contain information, your about, the contacts, your other features which that are usually at the top. Once you are scrolling there, it still remain there. So this is a good example for that. We've changed it to fix. Now the other property is the one they call sticky. Let's change it to sticky. Yeah, look at it, sticky. It's art almost similar to the fixed, but I think I will create more. It's art almost similar to the stick, but the difference is that as you are scrolling, you can see the movement. It will be. I let me add. Let me write this here. Let me write an HTML. I think I will use this to explain. Let me remove this. I think we are done with this already. We don't need it. So let me write an H1 CSS style. CSS style. Good. Let's call it CSS style. Then write another list. Inside this under, let me just write some properties. You know, property like border radius. Radius, good. So this is going to be CSS property. Another list content, we have the fonts, and the font has different. We have the font family. The font family. The one is for the font family. We have font size. Good. So we have written this. So let's target. Let me assume that this is just the H, right? It's not even inside any div, but let me just the H. Mm, good. We've targeted it at the H1, but it's not a circular. Should we use this? Let me not use this one. Let me use this. The box. No, this should be H1. Good. Already targeted this as the H1. Let's reduce the height a little bit. It's looking too big. Good. Now let's change the position property to sticky. Let's change it to sticky. Now let's scroll down and see how it applies. Okay, let's just leave it like that. Z index. The properties usually apply with the absolute. So let me reverse back to the previous code I wrote before. So let's go back to the previous code. Okay. Now inside the body, we add two div. And we add another div inside. Name of this, we gave this one a class name of first box, right? Why this one we gave it a class name of box, right? So now let's go back to our code. Dot first box. Good. Good. So the position, this one should be relative. Relative. Because if it is not relative, if the ancestor is not really, if it is not relative, this the second command will be applied, which is it will be relative to the top corner of your website. It will be relative to the top corner of your website. Let's put the absolute now. This one is absolute, right? Let's make it absolute and then do something. Just let's comment this out. Good. Let's uncomment this out. Good. So this is what I was trying to explain. So absolutes entirely remove the element from the normal flow, and it now makes it to be relative to the nearest position ancestor. If this plot does not exist, it will be relative to the topmost left corner of the browser, and this is how that will be. So now remember I said the first property must be relative. So let's uncomment this out. Good. Then the second one in, then the border radius, because we want it to be circular. If we don't want it to be circular, we can leave it that way. Then where do we want it to be? Good. Let's uncomment this one out. Now you just put this. Good. It's already center bar because I've given it this property. It said the top should be 50 pixel while the left should be 75 pixel. 75 pixels, so it is at the center. That's how it is. Now let's, what I said I wanted to show you, there's a property also called z index. The value is usually between 0 to 5, but the default value is 0. That means that if I don't apply anything, the default already has already been applied. The same thing with the static. When we say static is the default position of all elements. So let me give it a value of -1. Let's see what will happen. Good. You see that the thing actually disappears. Let me return it back. Since I said that it's default value, let me put it 0. Good. So now let's see. Let me adjust it out of the box so that you will see how it is. So the height of this is 20 pixel, right? So let me move it a little bit out. Let me make it 100 pixel. No, not to the left. 75. Return it back to the 75. But let me make this top 100. 100. Let me make it 120. Good. 120. So let me now add -1. Now you can see what the Z index property does is that it enables us to decide or to select which property or which HTML element or content appears above or behind. we may have other absolute, we may have created other absolute position, and we may want to design, we may even want a design that just look like this, and just using CSS we can achieve this, because now this is still the the box still exists, it's still within the flow. It's just that we've hid we've make the z in z to be -1, -1. So we've provided a value, so this one is giving more priority. This this red box, or the red div, is giving more priority compared to the blue div. So supposing we return it to the normal flow, this r is going to be return to the normal default flow, which is 0. Sorry, 0. This this is 0, not this one is o, 0. So you can see how it is. So like I said, all these types of positioning are very, very important. The absolute positioning, the relative positioning, the fixed positioning, the sticky, and the we also need to know the default one, which is the static. Position are very, very important in CSS, so that we'll be able to know how to position our properties in the right way, depending on what we want to design. So like I said, the fixed is majorly used for navigation bar. You know, your navigation bar is at the top. Let me see if I can open a website and see if we can see any similar one when we can scroll that has a fix. We can even open W3 School. W3 School. Good. Okay, no, we good. We are just here. So let's scroll. You can see, yeah, W3 School. You can see this, they are actually fixed. The navigation bar are actually fixed. We are moving, we are scrolling down, but they still remain at the same location. So this is a very good example of using the fixed property here. You can see this place remain fixed. It's not moving. It's just at the top. Well, so we can use the fixed positioning for our navigation. So that is all. We can also get resources about CSS positioning. Okay, you can see resources on it here, but let me just type CSS positioning. Good. It's loading up. So as you can see, CSS is a broad topic. It's not, we have to break, you have to be decisive about learning it and breaking it down gradually. Breaking it down gradually. This is not what I asked for. They will ask for the CSS positioning properties. So yeah, so you can see the definition that they even gave you for the static, the absolute, the fixed, the relative, the sticky, they are the main one. Initial and inherent are, you can just read about them, and many resources online for you to play with. You can see the static is the default position, absolute. The element is position relative to its first position, the ancestor element. You can fixed relative to the browser itself. That means that it's fixed. Good. Relative. Another one is sticky. Exactly what I said is a toss between the relative and the position, fixed positioning. So that will be all for this video, and I will encourage you more to, apart from W3 school, there's also MDN MDN documents where you can also get information. One thing about CSS is just about practice. You must just try, try and practice what you've seen. Okay, you can see this W3 school. So it's taking it exactly out of the flow. So let's look at this together. So this is the position element. Yeah, it's loading relative. You can see this is the actual position. But when a relative style is provided, additional values are added to it, like the top, like this one. It's moved it. If a value was provided here from the top, it's moved it down to this level. Let's talk about the fixed. So fixed. So fixed is relative to the top left corner of the browser. Fixed, even that means when you scroll up or when you scroll down, it will remain there. So absolute absolute is relative to the ancestor, the nearest ancestor. That means the nearest parent. So it's relative to it. So don't. It's just good for you to know about this, know about the terminology and how it's explained and how it's defined, so that you can also under for a better understanding. And that's wrapped it all on CSS position property. Understanding each of each of them will help you know how to build a better layout and position element more precisely. If you find this video very helpful, give a like and subscribe for more web development tutorial. Thank you. That will be all for now. Bye.